So today's session is on job descriptions. And before we get there, I'm just going to kind of remind everyone of the first few steps in building out Touchtone and a little bit about how Touchstone's organized, which is related to how to build job descriptions. In the first session a few weeks ago, we talked about building your 4 key functions. So making a list of all the processes. This is an important step to do because when you get to building the job descriptions, it's very easy to build the job descriptions if your 4 functions list has been done. And you'll see what I mean by that in a minute here. So build out your 4 key functions. Make a list of all the processes. Organize them by category and list them out. Even if you don't go in and do the documentation right away, it's not necessary that you do that in this first step. Just make a master list. Then go and build your organization chart, thinking into the future, thinking about the vision of your business, building a chart as a picture of that business in the future so it becomes like a map on how you're going to get there, becomes a hiring plan, becomes a way to gauge profitability, do budgeting because you can understand who you're going to hire and when and what sales need to be in order to make that happen. So build this out as a strategic tool, a vision of the future. Once your org chart is done, then you can go and build all your job descriptions. So how the job descriptions are built is we look over at the 4 functions list over here and we assign processes to boxes on the chart. So every process in the 4 functions over here in one place or another will be linked to a box on the organization chart. Another way to say it is you're assigning accountability for all of this work to the positions on the org chart who are responsible for that work. When you click a box from the chart, it takes you to the job description. So this job description has been built, obviously. You'll see all the processes. These processes all live in the 4 functions list. So they're organized by category over here, subject area, and then they're linked to the positions who are responsible for them. When I click a process here from the job description, it takes me here, which is where the documentation for that process is created. So using these tools over here, or these templates, we go through and document, in this example, how one-on-one meetings happen. Then the process is then linked to whoever's accountable for doing that work. When I click a process here again, you can see from this breadcrumb trail where it is on the 4 functions list. So this trail is a good thing to get familiar with because it allows you to toggle back and forth between the 4 functions list and the process quite easily. And then it also, when you click a process from a job description, it shows you exactly where that process is on the 4 functions list. In addition, using this toolbar item right here called Link to Job Description, I can see which job descriptions this process has been linked to. So we're going to come back to this tool in a minute, but I just want you to see from the process page itself, the process tools page, right here, you can see what job description it's been linked to, and from right here, you can see where it is on the 4 functions list. So let's talk about how to use job descriptions. My career spans 20 years of business development, being a consultant and then working on building out processes and creating process-dependent businesses. I've been a manager for most of those years. Job descriptions, to me, are the primary management tool that I use in all situations and all circumstances. What the job description really is it's a clear, accurate picture of what my employees need to be doing, what I need to teach them how to do, what I need to follow up with them about, what I need to manage their results by, how I need to communicate to them. All of it is depicted in this job description. So what I love about the job descriptions, particularly the ones in Touchtone, is that it makes it very tangible. A lot of times management can be just a very fluid, difficult thing when you're trying to kind of manage people with no training and really in a way forcing them to kind of make it up as they go along. That's very difficult because it's not fair to then look at that person and say, well, you're not succeeding, when the manager hasn't really been accountable for showing them how to succeed in a tangible way. Not just, I told you so, but here, let me show you. So the job description fills that purpose in management. So there, in management, just to break it down simply, there's new employee training, which is essential. And a lot of employees in small businesses never get new employee training. So that makes their jobs, 100 times more difficult. So new employee training and then ongoing training. The job description is key for both of those purposes, both of those management purposes. For new employee training, I use this like a checklist, and I'm actually going to show you here in Management Review on the dashboard how you can actually check it. So for a sales assistant that I just hire, this is my checklist for what they need to be trained in. So I go one process at a time and give them a training. How we do time management here and the tools we use for that and what we do to follow that process. How to clock hours, how to do sales follow-up, how to do an advertising plan, how to set appointments. So I go through one process at a time and train that employee in how to do that work. Sounds simple, right? It's beautiful when it works that way. There are always going to be things with every position where it's not documented, or you can't document that because I just did that yesterday, but I'm never going to do it again. So if your mind's going to things like that, kind of let go of those variables and focus on what is consistent, because the majority of what all employees do, whether you want to believe it or not, is rudimentary and consistent. Some of it's more complicated than others based on what kind of industry and work that they do, but the majority of it is consistent. So let go of the variables and think about what's consistent. So with this job description, I as a manager can look at it and say, well, for a new employee, I'm going to teach them these processes. It's going to take me X number of hours to teach them how to clock hours. Let's say that takes 20 minutes. It's super easy, right? This is how you do it. Here's the work plan. Study it. Let me see you do it. Great. Sales follow-up, that might be longer. That might take, this is full of scripts and probably, a few work plans, a lot of standards around how we follow up. There might be a computer aspect of it where I have to put in appointments. So maybe this takes, 30 hours to learn sales follow-up. So as a manager, when you're thinking of new employee training, go through and try to guesstimate how long it takes to train someone in all these processes. When you add up all that time, and then you times it by what you're paying them, and then you add the management time, you add the overhead, then you've got a pretty good sense of what it's going to cost to hire a new employee, which is a fabulous thing to know. Because if we go back here to the organization chart and you're thinking about growing your business, going into the future, hiring new positions, if you can tell me exactly how long it's going to take to bring someone in here and how much money it's going to cost you, if the person is competent to then move up here and then to move up here, well, you've just unlocked part of the answer to how to juggle sales and marketing and operations, right? How long is it going to take you to scale it up? And the job descriptions are a key to that. They are everything you need for it. Another thing that's helpful with ongoing training, or new employee training, is that if I've hired someone and made a mistake, I'm going to be able to see it much sooner if I'm taking them through a step-by-step training like this, through every process. Because if I know that I hired 5 people last year and it took them 30 hours to learn this, and I've hired someone and they're just not getting it after 30 hours, or maybe even after 15, I know they're just not going to get it, well, then I can cut my losses with that person early and save a infinite amount of money. There's like statistics done all the time on the amount of money that's wasted by bad hires. So I can save the business money, and honestly, that person I've hired, you can save them a lot of time and frustration and issue. So this helps you kind of gauge, do you have the right person or not, which is key as a manager. We're always asking ourselves that. I mean, is this person going to be able to do it? Are they as good as this other person? This makes it tangible. So new employee training. Again, I'm going to show you in the dashboard and management review before we end here how you can actually tick off these boxes in management review. Then ongoing training. So let's talk about that for a minute. So you've got existing employees. A lot of you who are new to Touchtone are just building your job descriptions. You may not even have all the documentation yet. And you're trying to take processes, documented processes, and implement them with people or employees who aren't used to that, like they've never seen it before, not used to to have training. You're going to have some personalities who just gravitate to this and are like, oh, this is the best thing ever, because their mind works that way. And then you're going to have the old guard or other people who don't like it. They don't want it. They think it's a waste of time. They don't want to spend their effort on it. They'd rather not be seen that way. They want to kind of do their own thing. They don't want the accountability of being defined by processes. And that might be for a variety of reasons. But with employees like that, it's a challenge to kind of get this adopted. So push forward with it. Be diligent about it, because the implementation and the use of these processes is absolutely essential to the success of them, clearly. So this is some ways that I, for ongoing training, use job descriptions and use documented processes. If I've got a problem with an employee, I will refer back to the job description always. So if I've got someone who does sales follow-up and their follow-up rates are not as good as others, or I have some salespeople who have a much better conversion rate than others, or somebody hasn't been doing their to-do checklist that they're supposed to do every day, I would go back to the job description and say, okay, let's sit down and talk about this together. Let's look at the sales follow-up process. Let's discuss how you're using it. Are you following this step? I noticed here that this follow-up never happened. Let's talk about why. So let's look at the process and decide what's wrong with the process. Is the process not working? Is it not working for you? So you hear the tone of my voice is not, what's wrong with you? I told you 5 times yesterday to do the follow-up. I'm looking, you're not doing it. You don't listen to me. You're insubordinate. It's not personal. It's about the process. Let's discuss the process. It takes all the emotion and the angst out of management. I hate that other kind of management. It's terrible. It's terrible for the employee, and it's terrible for the manager, because it's all about blaming, like who's not doing it right, or you're not good enough. This type of management, where you're managing with a job description, it's about the process. So I can take an employee by looking at the process and making it about that, and understand what they're capable of doing, what they're doing, and what they're doing well, and what they need help on. We may decide in the end that they just can't do sales follow-up, but we're making it the fault of the process. We're saying you're not following it, or how can I help you to follow it? Or sometimes the process just doesn't work, so let's change it. So the tone of management changes. Also, you can use the job description as a way of trying to understand how your employees are spending their time. So this is a common thing in management, where you're looking at what that person's doing and saying, what do they do? And are they doing that? This is a frustration with management and with a lot of business owners. So this makes it tangible. You can talk about the times that you're supposed to be doing everything, how long it's taking. Are you doing it efficiently? So the job description helps with all those types of management issues as well. The job description helps with communication. So if I want to address something with an employee, or they're asking me a ton of questions about something and it's interrupting me and they're not quite taking ownership for figuring it out, I can refer back to the job description. So if I need to say to them, you're clocking in your hours wrong, go look at the process, go into the dashboard and make a note to me that you've read it and that you understand where you're going wrong with it. I don't even have to sit and have a meeting with them. I'm saying, go own it. Go to the process. Or if they need access to information. So this used to happen to me years ago where employees would just come knock on the door. What about this? I need this. Did you do this? Where's this? Nowadays, nobody knocks on my door because they know what they're going to get is, go look in Touchtone. It's right there. The documents are all there. Or you have this question. I know it's in that process because I wrote that process. So go look at the process. So no longer are you kind of being the answer man to everything that's happening with employees, because you're instead directing them back to where the content is. I was laughing with a Touchtone user last week because we ended up laughing about it, but they were complaining and saying, it's not worth the time to document this. It takes too much time. I'm too busy. I can't get to it. And we started to dissect how much time they'd been wasting over the years by not having that process. And that's when they started laughing, because, and all of you know it's true, if you think about it, the not having of the processes and not being able to manage with them has cost you so much time and money that even if it took 5 hours to document, it would just be worth it tenfold. So this is an example of how, just with management alone. The minute a manager changes their tone like that and makes the employee accountable for what they're responsible for, and they can do it in a very tangible way, like on a job description, the employee learns something new. It's like they learn a life skill almost, and it's redirected the whole business in a different direction. It takes time to get there, takes them getting used to it, but it's completely worth it in the end. So a couple other, I can go on for hours on how to use job descriptions, but a few things I just want to point out, and one of them is the process of the week and how it works with the job description. So the process of the week that I've chosen is one-on-one meetings. And I'm not going to go into performance review, but I'm going to mention this one as well. So employee one-on-one meetings are very simple. And there's a process in the library called employee one-on-one meetings. This is a way that you communicate with your employees. Now, if you do this once a week, I think it's great. This says usually once a week. Even if you do it once a month, it's fine. It's better than nothing. So all that happens in these one-on-one meetings is that the manager makes time to sit down with that employee, even for a half an hour. An hour is good, but half an hour is fine too. You don't have time not to do meetings like this. So if that question of, I don't have time to sit and have a one-on-one meeting with every employee every week or every month is in your head, you don't have time not to do this, because this is essential for management. Sit down in that meeting, talk about how the work's going. Look at the job description. Go to the dashboard in Touchtone. Go to the org chart. Look at the job description. Talk about how the work is going. That's it. It could be as simple as, how are sales follow-up going? Or how did this project happen? How are you doing? How's your week been? So questions like that, where you have with them right in front of them while you're talking to them, are a great way to check in with your employees, but then to also reinforce the processes, reinforce the job description, have it be the way that you communicate. So there's a form inside this process where you can put, items to discuss, goals achieved, goals from last period, things to resolve, notes. So you can the manager can fill out all those information. It's like you're preparing the agenda, and save it back to Touchtone, and then call it up before the meeting. You can print it out if you must, or you can have it, on your phone or on your computer and look at the agenda and go through it. So this is, again, just about stopping for a minute and communicating with the employee. If you implement a meeting system like this, even if it's once a month, then you're going to start to do other time-saving things. Like you're going to say to yourself, I'm not going to go knock on their door or send them an email about that right now. I'm going to save it for the meeting. So you start saving things for the meeting, saving them for the meeting. Not big problems that have to be handled right away. Put those in the variable category. Things that can wait for the meeting, save them for the meeting, because it's much more efficient to, rather than reacting, to sit and say, okay, there's this problem. instead of just talking about it as we're walking down the hall, let's look at the process for that, or let's decide we need a process for that and make it more of a strategic thing in a meeting. So I'm going to mention performance reviews just here for a minute, and then we'll talk about how to use these things that I just showed you in the dashboard. So let me go back to this one. If you're using the job descriptions as a management tool, you're having your one-on-one meetings, this becomes kind of like an agenda for topics of conversation. Even in department meetings that you might be having for like the sales department, you can decide on like a process of the month if you want to. So every month you review one process on the job description, just as a way of checking in on the documentation. How's it going? Does anyone have any ideas on how it could be better? Great, it's perfect. Move on to the next agenda item. So doing things like that where you're discussing the processes in these one-on-one meetings or even in department meetings is great. So you're having your one-on-one meetings, you're using the job descriptions, and then you get to the end of the year where it's time for a performance review. The job description is the performance review. It's another cool thing about the job description. You look at our performance review process in the Guide into Business library, and it steps you through this. Also in the Resource Center, there's a video on it as well, on how to use the performance review process. But basically, this is the performance review. So what we have you do is you take the job description, you literally copy and paste it into the performance review form, and then you give a rating on each of these processes. How have they been doing on sales follow-up? How have they been doing on setting appointments? How have they been doing on building strategic alliances? You give a rating and you put comments. Now, if you've been talking about this job description and these processes in your one-on-one meetings for an entire year, when you get to do the performance review, and all the performance review is just a recap of these processes, it's going to be so easy to fill that performance review out and to give it. There's going to be no surprises. They're going to know exactly where they're at, and it's going to be very tangible, which is the most difficult thing about performance reviews, making it tangible. Because if I don't have processes to refer to, if we haven't been discussing how you've been doing in a tangible way all year, when we get down to review time, it's just going to be whatever I can remember. And if I have to say difficult things and I can't back them up with actual real information, then I'm just kind of making it up. And that's a really difficult type of review to have with an employee. So performance review, that's the other way to kind of ultimately use this job description as a management tool. So let's go to the dashboard here. So first thing I want to show you is the new employee training piece. So if we go down here to this person, so I'm in management review right now, and since I'm Sam's manager, I see his job description. I see his control panel. So these are all the processes from the sales assistant's job description. And when Sam logs into Touchtone, he logs in with his own username and password, and he's going in and using and completing these processes. So if I'm doing new employee training for Sam, I'd start with his daily to-do list. So we go to this process. I say, look, Sam, here's the daily to-do checklist. This is how you do it. This is how you go through it. This is what it's here for. So I'm giving him a training, showing it to him, making sure he understands it. When I'm happy with his training, he's demonstrated that he understands how to use this checklist. I can put in notes. So these are, training notes that I could add if I wanted to add notes. And then I flip this box that says trained, and I save the note. Now if we go back, trained, okay, there it is. Now if we go back to his management review list, then I go to the next process. Go down, hit trained all. I'm happy with his training. And then I go back, and then I see these check marks. For some reason, this one didn't save. But this is the green check is the indicator that he's been trained in that process. When he logs in, he sees the check, and I see it as his manager. Then I go to the next process. I'm training him. I hit the train check mark, and then he's trained in that process. So this is the new employee training. I go process by process in a timed way, give him a thorough training. You can even build tests into these processes using the custom form tool, which is kind of cool. Then the employee has to go in and take the test, and then you can review it here in management review. So I slowly check these off, and then when he's fully trained, there's going to be a green check mark next to every single one of these processes. So let's go back to the dashboard. So here's my control panel, and I'm going to show you the one-on-one meeting process. So here's that one-on-one meeting process. When I select this, I could go down to the custom form. So I'm going to prepare for a meeting for an employee. I can save this as their name. I have just a blank notes field here. I can put it, when I save this, a date and time stamps it, but I can put the meeting date if I want in here. Items to discuss, so these are the things that I want to go over with him. And then when I fill out this agenda form, then I save it. It's going to date and time stamp it, and it saves this form back to Touchtone. So then, after I've had the meeting, I'm preparing for the next meeting. I can go here to this completed folder, and I can look back at the meeting we did last week and remind myself of kind of what I want to do this week. And then I also see all the meeting forms that I've had with him over the year. When I'm doing performance reviews, I go back to Touchtone and look at all of these for the whole year. And any of them that have information in them about things that we talked about that are relative to the performance review, I have it all right here, easy to find and use. In addition, if my manager ever wants to know if I'm doing my meetings and how my employees are doing, so if we look back here at the org chart, so if this person wants to know how I'm doing with all of these people, they can go and run a report because they have management review of me, and they can see all the agenda forms and what happened and who's doing what and how the employee's doing, which is great because one of the best things about upper level management, or can be the best thing, is when you can see what's going on with all of these people without having to ask them or without having to be there all the time, or without there having to be a problem before you find out. So that's another way that these one-on-one meetings can be really useful. And then I'll just show you performance review since we have 2 more minutes here. So I'm back on my control panel for manager, marketing, and sales. So here's the performance review. So here I go to a performance review that I'm going to do for an employee. This one has a checklist in it that I might fill out. Here's the actual form itself. And then I go and fill this out for that employee. Put in their name. Here's where, and this happens on the process tools page, but this is where you cut and paste all the processes in from their job description. So this is the evaluation form. This is for the salesperson or whatever position it is. I go to their job description in Touchtone. I highlight, do right-click, copy, and then I paste the processes right in here. And then I give them a grade, based on how the rating is. We give you, if you use the library process, we give you this whole description here to use, which you can edit and make your own, but this is, I think, a pretty good way of doing it. And then you write in comments right here. Sometimes I cut and paste the comments from my one-on-one meeting forms too, because it's what I said 6 months ago is still relevant, and then I can cut and paste the comments in, and I can even say, we talked about this on this date and time. So these are all the processes from the job description, and you're just basically giving them a rating. Now our performance review form has other things in it. This one's not showing it, but it has long-term goals, and there's other stuff that can be relevant during a review. But this is really the heart of it. It's evaluating them on their processes, basically. So again, all this gets saved back to Touchtone. Once I save it, I can print it if you want a printed copy to file somewhere. But this review form itself is now saved back to Touchtone. And then a lot of times before I do reviews, I'll run a report to call up the reviews from last year. And then I can look at the review last year and use that to kind of inform this year as well. But what's nice about it is all this information is in Touchtone in one place, and it's not a scramble to kind of try to find where it all is.